Hello everyone, my name is Jonna Bo Lammers. Before I'm gonna, in Falk's words, slay, I want to give a little trigger warning because I'm gonna be talking about sexual assault. And I wanted to give the opportunity for people to maybe sit this one out if you feel like this is not helping you or possible for you to listen to right now, or you can, if you want, sit close to the door. And also I wanted to give the option that maybe if you are doubting about being here, I will go outside with you and I'll kind of explain maybe what I'm going to say in like lighter terms to see if there's if it's okay still for you. So I want to check with everyone. It's okay. Again, for you also, I'm going to be talking about sexual assault. I wanted to give everyone the moment to go outside if they feel like they don't want to sit through this one. Yeah? Okay, good. Also, I am filming this for myself. If you have a question that you want to be cut out at the end, that's totally okay. Just come to me. But yeah, just so you know. So, I'm going to start with the story of something that happened to me precisely a year ago. It was at the December presentations of the now graduated M2s. And it was in between the 2 days. I was on my way to my Swedish language class, and I was sitting in a very busy metro. I was sitting in a 4-seater, and the man across from me was very intensely watching me. I was doing the last parts of my Swedish homework, so I shoved my face back into my books. But every time I looked up, I saw him intensely staring. The last time I glazed over my book, I saw that he was still intensely looking at me, and he was masturbating. I got a wave of adrenaline and I immediately went into flight mode, and I stood up. I almost dropped my books and I ran to the other side of the train. I remember vaguely looking back if someone would accuse him or say something, but I think nothing happened, and I left the train, stopped too early, and I ran to my Swedish class. I tried to talk to a friend from my Swedish class about this, but my teacher interrupted me because I was late and made us begin the lesson. I shoved it back into my mind and I tried to concentrate. I remember not being able to go into the metro to go back home. The next morning I also couldn't enter the metro again. It felt like the ghost was still sitting there. And still, after all of the clear signs of a trauma, I couldn't acknowledge that what happened was sexual assault. I have experienced sexual assault before, so I know how to deal with a trauma like this. Why couldn't I see it? After processing the incident and giving it some time and good conversation, I realized that because I wasn't touched, I thought it wasn't real sexual assault. Where did I get this idea? During this time, I was also making an illustration for crowdfunding for a documentary about the aftermath of sexual assault. And for this, I looked at many visualizations of sexual assault. I always like to do this research on how a topic has been visualized before I start work. I kind of can gauge already the visual language that is already being used, everyone that they already understand. And all of these images you can see here are photos accompanying articles about sexual assault in national or local newspapers in the Netherlands and Sweden. So think about articles like study, 1 in 3 women has experienced sexual assault, or man assaults woman in the streets of Africa. And then I began to see patterns. First, touch is everywhere. So now I also understood my perspective about the touching. And almost always a white woman victim or survivor, white man harasser. But then other patterns also emerged. The survivor of the assault is almost always portrayed, not the harasser. We get kind of put into the literal perspective of the assaulter most of the times. Sometimes more extreme than others. I feel like here it's like you are almost doing the assaulting and someone is telling you to stop. And here, sometimes it's like a creep shot almost in the streets, or you are putting your hand on someone's hand at the photocopier, or your hand on someone's shoulder, or you are the person holding someone down. Again, these are all pictures from like very national newspapers. And then there's also such a big emphasis on saying no and resisting, which I think is really problematic because there's already a big problem with guilt in sexual assault, and if you're already also insinuating this, saying stop, maybe survivors will think, I didn't do this, maybe then it wasn't real. Again, more resisting. And then I have some other examples that I took a couple of weeks ago also from different papers. So the thing is, a lot of these images aren't inherently bad. It's just that the endless repeating of them makes it such a simplified story and one truth. And I'm missing so much color, figuratively and literally. And I realized that also some of these ideas have seeped through me too, that I have reproduced them. At this point in the master's course, we were following the course An Introduction to Non-Creativity by Rebecca Windhagen, and we had been introduced to the single story principle by writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She has an amazing TED Talk about this, where she describes the dangers of a single story. Media and literature available to the public often only tell one story, which causes people to generalize and make assumptions about groups of people. Adichie shares an example, how she, as a young child growing up in Nigeria, would only write stories about white characters talking about the weather and drinking ginger beer, because she had become convinced that books, by their very nature, had to have foreigners in them, and had to be about things that she could not personally identify with. Only reading about the same thing happening can create this one truth, this single story. And I think this kind of happens with sexual assault through images, and also happened for me. I started a conversation with Centrum Seksueel Geweld, which is the Center of Sexual Violence in the Netherlands, and I realized that they were also on the same trajectory. They had just had a press conference with a bunch of newspapers to ask to stop the use of the stop hand picture, and the newspapers immediately asked, what can we use then? And they didn't really have an answer immediately. We talked about compiling all of my research into a PDF document, and I could maybe give lectures at these kind of press conferences and maybe work on the answer or what to use instead. But I have a beautiful quote by them in an internal message about my research to the different departments that I think sums it up. It is striking that we pay so much attention to carefully choosing our words, but we leave the use of images up to the journalists, while images in reporting are at least as important for framing and how we as a society view sexual violence. So I think this is super interesting and I guess like good for the cause of visual communication. One thing that the Center of Sexual Violence does really well is brief illustrators when illustrating about sexual abuse with children. Because they specifically say not to show the child sad or angry, but neutral, or sometimes even smiling. This is because in many cases, the child obviously doesn't know that it is wrong what is happening. And with these illustrations, they can recognize themselves. And I think this is something that we should also do with every kind of sexual assault in illustration or in visualization. So, I felt like the images that are around today are quite harmful. And I'm seeing the same thing over and over. And the thing that is most bugging me is the perspective and the saying stop. So, what can I do? This is what my degree project is about. I have the way that is represented now, and I want to make new work that is adding diversity to this topic. things that I'm missing from the image library. And this way, hopefully adding to the change about how we think about sexual assault. Making it not about the question, but did you say no? Or did they force you? And making survivors feel seen. And hopefully when they see these new images, they can feel recognized and they can recognize their own experience. Like, yes, that was actually sexual assault and that was wrong and that was not your fault. So how am I doing this? I'm doing this through a couple of, I would say, lenses. So norm criticality and norm creativity. My whole project is in essence about norm criticality because it is critical of the norm of how sexual violence is being visualized right now, but also analyzing the norms and using them kind of against itself, being norm creative in a way. So here I focus on this idea of that the harasser is never portrayed, so I flipped the perspective, literally, and I show like my own experience, which is something that I didn't really see so much. And here I show like more of the aftermath of how something like this can keep with you, can feel also afterwards. Like how I interpret this is this: every time I go back on the metro, I still see this. I see the possibility of this happening again. I really want to show the harasser, and I give him like 4 hands to show how that felt for me. And then also, I use illustration. So most of the examples that I find that are the most repetitive and harmful are photos. And I've chosen not to use any photography in my project. Photos can only tell so much, and yes, you can show a person touching another person, but that's not the only thing that is happening. So much more is happening inside of the mind. It is an intrusion of the body, power imbalance being enforced, and all of these things, they can kind of get lost in a photo, I think. And with illustration, you can show the internal world of the subjects. Sarah Tilleman told me that the Svenska Dagbladet always commissions an illustrator to make an image when there's an article about mental health. Also because then there's time to do a commission, because these kind of news images or news messages don't have to go out immediately. But also because you can show what is going on inside, rather than to have just like a picture of someone doing this, I guess. And I think they should do this with sexual violence and sexual assault too. I think this would be a really great addition. And there is a precedent for it. So, but yes, probably photography will still play a big part. But I'd rather work with stock photographers on that, or photographers on that. And that's maybe something that I will want to do after graduation. But yeah. And also colors and style. So I started these illustrations working with quite dark colors. So this is one of the first sketches that I made, and I had a shit time making it because it's just, I don't like the dark colors, and it's just, it makes it like, I don't know, like even more heavy, and I don't want to look at it. So as a kind of compromise with myself to keep it bearable, I started using a lot of brighter colors. And I quite like what happens because, I like that it challenges the idea of dark topic, dark colors, happy topic, happy colors, because I think it's shit. But also, I like that color is also a method to create impact and also to attract. And I want people to look at these works, so I attract them with the color and the form. Like, for instance, Sisla also does great, I think. And also, I was talking to a philosopher that writes about consent, and she thought that this method was also super interesting, because she says sexual violence is ugly, yes, but a lot of the time, a lot of the things that can happen before a sexual assault can have a lot of beauty. And it sounds maybe a little bit weird, but wanting to be open and close to people and wanting to have intimacy, but maybe not that kind of intimacy, or maybe not wanting it anymore. It's super complex. Yeah, I thought it was a super interesting take of her. And then I brought it back to my own medium, murals. I would call myself a muralist. I like to paint on buildings and walls where a lot of people can see them, because I think it's nice. It's a nice medium to be connected to a lot of people in society. It's like at least everyone on the streets. And murals are so impactful in that way, and that's really what I want to do. I want to create impact. And I always use a lot of beauty to get jobs on big visible walls. And then I can hide kind of my own messages in that beauty. People, they walk by murals every day, so I'm sure that they will find it at one point, these messages. But I've never really made murals about sexual assault in this way, so I did an experiment in Harvard. So I made a big illustration of the masturbating man, and because of the style and the colors, the effect that the audience had was almost kind of mirroring the experience that I had in the moment. It was like walking up to it and so fint and beautiful colors, and then you would stare and maybe like look a bit longer, and it would be like, oh, it's just like an old man fumbling. Oh no. Oh, what is really happening? Oh no. So I think it's kind of interesting that this method kind of achieved the same experience that I had. A little detour with the course of ornamentation by Svante Tieren. During his course, he told me about how Stockholm had a lot of building ornamentation with depictions of rape. I thought this was super, super interesting. The pictures of sexual assault are already everywhere around us, in mainstream fashion marketing, in series and films, in reality TV, but on buildings and on the streets, I just thought this is super interesting, and also a great bridge to making a mural about this. Making a mural in the city somewhere that is pointing to or reflecting on or challenging this phenomena. But yeah, this is still ongoing research. So back to murals. So I also want to make a mural for my degree exhibition as a kind of like my way, my publication, like my way to publicize my project, because I guess it is also a publication. And maybe I can still use this ornamentation idea also here. But yeah, the work is essentially for everyone, survivors, harassers, bystanders, making them conscious of this visual language and what it is telling us, and trying to change ideas about sexual violence. So I think the street is a good place. And remember in the beginning when I was talking about that I was doing the research on the crowdfunding documentary illustration? So I was in this documentary. So a good friend of mine is working with the topic of sexual assault too, big coincidence, but she is a journalist and a documentary maker. And in her documentaries, she interviews survivors of sexual assault and talks about the impact and how best to give yourself space to process, but also for bystanders, how to respond when something like this happens to someone close to you. And I was in this documentary as an illustrator. So I was making a mural that was cut through the interviews of the documentary. And there was also a dance, which was both two kind of interpretations of the aftermath of sexual assault, which was really beautiful. I can show a little bit maybe. My laptop is really slow. It's in Dutch, so sorry. Oh, the sound is not working. Well, doesn't really matter. But yeah, so it was like interviews and then shots like these, cuts in the middle of the interviews. and then with a beautiful soundtrack that you can't hear right now. So, and the takeaway of what I thought was really beautiful about this documentary is that it tries to take the emphasis of the experience of sexual assault, but it puts the emphasis on the impact. Like, what did it do with you afterwards? What could and couldn't you do after? How did you feel? This is what is important. The most, like, sometimes when you have experience like this, someone asks you what happened, but it tries to take that away. It tries to go to like, well, what did that do to you? The impact of a single encounter can really be disastrous, and it can be the same as long-term abuse. And in this way, if we don't ask people about what happened, we let the survivors own their own experience, and we don't have to come in and judge for them if it's like, how bad was it really, like what happened to you. The whole documentary is set up in a way that is listening to the experiences of the people being interviewed, where you're almost getting lured into this curiosity of what had really happened to them, but you're never getting it. At the end, you're getting almost like a good scolding of like, shame on you for thinking that. So I thought that was super interesting. And I met a lot of interesting people at the documentary, The Philosopher, that I was talking about. So there's still a lot for me to do. And I think I have many images that I want to change, but I have also a lot that I want to explore more. I really want to explore non-verbal sexual abuse more. I want to have the survivor not looking so sad, maybe try even happy. I want to show more of the harasser, more of the survivor's perspective, much more. So in the end, I hope to have a collection of illustrations that, in my view, depict sexual violence in a better way than it is now depicted in the media. A website that shows my research and can act like a guide that is intended for sexual health organizations that I can use for my lectures. This was before a PDF document, but I think a website will be better because it's easier to change if there are some new things that I want to add to it. And a mural as a way to publicize my work. So that's all that I would like to do. I'm not planning on having this project ending at graduation. I would like to continue it. There's way more things that I would like to do. But yeah, I actually want to be way further than how I am now at this point. But yeah, there was some things in my life happening. Thank you for listening, and feel free to talk to me about anything, everything at any time. And I would like to take a moment to think about my dear cat that died last week. So yeah, thank you so much.